order to truly know thyself, it is important to understand and know thy history. It's important to know where we come from and the origins that have led us to where we are today. Not only that, but these various groups that came before us, they embodied different types of energies. They carried with them different stories and different aspects of culture that we have adopted in today's modern times. One of those groups of people that I wanted to discuss that has had a profound impact on our society is the Druids. The Druids were a group of individuals that often had a very profound weight in society, not only their own tribes, but also other tribes. Because the Druids, they had this energy about them. They had this wisdom about them because of the many long years that they spent studying. They would spend over 20 years studying these systems, the zodiac, the astrological, just like thousands and thousands of symbols they would have to memorize. They basically were at the forefront of education. So what would happen, these tribes and these different societies, they would come to these Druids. They would come to them for counsel, for wise counsel. A lot of kings especially would come to them because they were aware of the level of wisdom that they had and the connection that they had to the land and to themselves. Most importantly, they knew and understood the basic laws of the universe in order to best help govern and maintain that balance within societies. The Druids were the priests to the Celtics. And I also want to point out too that there were several different geographical locations where each location had their own governing system. It's where they had their own archdruid and they had their own classification of high-ranking individuals within that system. There's the Druids of Gaul, the British Druids, and the Irish Druids. And in order to progress through the ranks of a Druid, there are many different steps that one has to take and study for many years. One of the things that they would do often is a child would go away from the parent for the first 14 years of their life because the Druids knew how important a child's development is within that time frame, especially the first 7 years, but the first 14 to really build that foundation and that structure to help them truly step into this and embody this energy, embody this archetype. Hi, my name is Cody, and I help people to activate their divine consciousness codes that will ignite their heart ablaze and open the door to limitless possibilities. So the Druids had their own unique system, and they had devised a way to be able to harness the most efficient way of utilizing their energy and to tap into the energy and the magic of the world around us. They knew that this world was beaming with this magical essence, this life, that if we understood how to tap into that and how to connect with that energy, we too could harness that power. But not from a place of dominance, from a place of love, from a place of compassion, from a place of understanding. The Druids had this deep understanding of nature and how the governing systems within nature operated. As such, they created a lot of their systems based on what they saw in the natural world, based on these natural systems that were already guaranteed to work. They observed nature and the many lessons that nature had to teach us, along with all the many different other systems like astronomy and astrology and all the sciences. Specifically with nature, they studied and observed the effects and the patterns that yielded the best results. And they were able to reproduce that in a way that would synchronize with their ceremonies, with their practices, in order to help them to harmonize within that energy and to tap into that. One of the systems that the Druids worked with was a more gender-specific type of system. The concept of dualism reflects very deeply into the principles of Druidism. And within that, we had two classifications of Druids. There was the motherhood of Avalon and the fatherhood of Anglesey. Each gender-specific body of consciousness is governed by different laws. So it's similar to how our left and right hemisphere work within our brain. Our left and right brain hemispheres are divided. They don't actually touch each other. They are divided, but they work as one unifying organ within our body. But those two hemispheres make up the whole that is the brain. And we need both parts in order to operate at our fullest capacity. And in a similar way, within the physical world, it trickles down, the as above, so below. These things translate into the external world to where we are able to see that like attracts like type of energy. And the way the Druids referred to it was, if you think of tuning forks and sympathetic vibration, then you would find that we are similar to those types of vibrations, because there are constructive and destructive interference patterns as well to consider, to where the constructive, they combine these patterns, these waves, they come into each other. It's a rise and fall. So whenever these two waves combine, when they're in destructive interference, they basically cancel each other out, because the high and the low come together to cancel itself out. Whereas when you have constructive interference, it adds to itself, because the waves are in the same frequency. If you want to think about it like this, it's like the two basic tones of creation, which means they're going to vibrate at a different frequency. When one tuning fork is struck, the other tuning fork, if it is in the same tone, the same frequency as that tuning fork, it's going to resonate automatically without even having to be struck. And that's the power of sympathetic vibration. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the gender-specific systems is the fact of how they've done studies to show that men are attuned to the sun cycles and women are attuned to the moon cycles, which in and of itself represents the balance of light and dark, of masculine and feminine, of the yin and yang, the duality of this life. And the whole aspect of homeopathy is that like cures like, which when they refer to the sympathetic vibration, that's what they're referring to, is that when we draw to us these energies that are a similar vibration, a similar frequency, we're able to work with these medicines to be able to dissolve this energy within our body, especially using tuning forks and crystal bowls and things like that, to be able to help break up that energy that is inside of our body, to really dissolve that within us, because we start to vibrate and resonate at this frequency that these sounds are emanating from. And when we feel those vibrations within our body, we start to really feel it, and it resonates within the various organs in which that energy may be stuck. When that happens, we are able to tap into that and feel into that and allow whatever comes up to come up within us. I've had experiences where I went to yoga festivals and I would be doing these meditations. I remember the first time that I went to one of the events, it was a crystal bowl, like a guided meditation type of thing. And it was one of the most transformative experiences I had in my life up until that point, especially because I hadn't really dealt with a lot of the pain and trauma of my past at that point in time, and I didn't know how or even exactly where it was at or what it was. So when I did that, I'm laying there and all this emotion comes rushing into my body, and suddenly I just start pouring out tears. It was like as she was going around with the crystal bowl, those vibrations were sounding. I could feel it in my body. It's like I could feel it. Those emotions were coming up, and then I just remember the word abandonment coming up in my mind. And I remember the emotions around that and the feelings that I had in my body, and I let it all out, and I let it all go, and I allowed that energy to come out of me, because she was tapping into this resonant frequency that was attuned within my body, but that was contained within this crystal bowl or this tuning fork or whatever it is that you may be using. But for me, it was within that crystal bowl. It activated something within me that allowed me to tap into that and heal. I encourage you to find the things that resonate with you, that resonate and bring out these aspects of you that will help you to grow to your highest and best version. So the Druids believe very strongly in this gender-specific system because it allowed them to activate that constructive interference to where they could combine their energies, like attracts like, and can really amplify that effect to where there's no imbalance, there's no negation of energies. It's not to say that we can't have, ceremonies where we have men and women together. But if we wish to truly tap into our deepest reservoirs of energy, then we need to have some sort of separate integration. And then we can have a collective integration to where we have a way that we can synchronize with each other. But it is important to have these types of ceremonies, to have these types of rituals together with that type of energy. That's why later on in this year, I'm going to be going to a men's retreat to be able to step into that energy, to feel that, to experience what that is truly like. Because I've tried hosting some men's groups, like some men's gatherings, but it didn't really take off and have the effect that me and my buddy wanted it to. We had a few people that were meeting, and it was good for a little bit, but it wasn't exactly what we were looking for, and I do think we need more of that. The Druids believe in the true goal of spiritual evolution is not the union of opposites, but the absence of opposites. And that is why the Druids, I believe, actually remind me of a type of monk. And actually, I wanted to connect this to another video that I made about the Jedi. In Star Wars, the Jedis, they're based off of ancient cultures and ancient civilizations. And I believe the Druids were among those because the Druids were very similar in their principles and how the Jedi Order functions. For starters, the Jedi, they weren't permitted to have relationships. They weren't permitted to engage in what would cause them to be consumed within the attachments of life. And the Druids, I believe, function in a very similar way because they didn't have families. Druids were not permitted to marry. Another aspect that is very similar to how the Jedis function is the fact that the Druids believe that they could only have one apprentice at a time, that he is only allowed to take one student from each degree at one time. And those studying underneath the Druid were not able to take disciples either. There are a few other principles and things that I just wanted to touch on that truly embodied the Druidic teachings. This comes from, this actually is in the 21 Lessons of Merlin. This information is referenced from the Heralds, which is another Druid book. 3 virtues of wisdom: to be aware of all things, to endure all things, and to be removed from all things. The 3 spiritual instructors of mankind: mastery of self, mastery of the world, and mastery of the unknown. 3 things that make rebirth necessary. I really like this one. First one, his failure to obtain wisdom from the experiences that he has gained. Number 2, his failure to attain independence. Number 3, his clinging to the lower self, which is simply the physical 3D self that has the attachments and the things bound to this physical world. And 3 keys to Druidic mastery: to know, to dare, to keep silent. 3 things a bard ought not to reveal: injurious truth, the disgrace of a friend, and the secrets of the Druids. Next thing I wanted to talk about is the ranking system that they had. The Druids really believed in the tri-scale and the power of the Trinity and the triads. One of their archetypal symbols was the Triskele. The Triskele, which was represented by 3 spirals, represented the 3 worlds: mental, physical, and emotional, or the past, present, and future. really this was used to signify the many aspects of life and how it's often divided into branches of three. The Druids were well connected to so many different aspects of life and the land and everything. And they had this deep connection, especially to the elements, the four elements, and were able to understand, based on how each element works, how to work with those and how to call forth the various energies within that element and carry that over into other areas of their life. They had something that they called the four symbols of mastery. Each symbol that they had represented that specific element. And they would use this specific symbol only for the purpose of working within that element and connecting to that energy. They would carry this often in a box that would be protected and charged, and they would make sure that the energy within these symbols are cleared and only used for the specific purpose. And in this book, it talks about how they were able to summon the different elemental energies and elemental deities within each realm and connect with them. I thought that was really profound to see the embodiment of each element and what they had to do in order to go through that process of being able to activate and summon that energy. And I believe it's also symbolic because we're called to activate these energies within ourselves every single day. We have different elements of each: earth, air, fire, and water that we have to incorporate within us, that requires us to work through and sift through like an ever-unfolding journey. This dance, if you will, of life is about mastering these elements within us and being able to harness and bring those forward and give that back to the world. And that is what the Druids truly embodied. They truly harnessed and tapped into that essence of life. They would study for over 20 years on thousands and thousands of systems and memorizing and understanding and immersing themselves into the mysteries of life in order to fully connect and tap into that within themselves. The Druids were explorers in both the spirit and the physical realms. They're similar to shamans in that they were like an intermediary between worlds. Almost like they had this foresight that no one else was able to see because they had immersed themselves into those realms for so long, for so many years, and they were tested. Not only did they have the 20 years of study, plus an additional unnamed run of the ladder that they would have to go up, climbing through these ranks, but they also had 3 quests of mastery that they had to go on to represent the past, present, and the future. They really tested themselves against the forces of nature, not only by immersing themselves in such a way, but they also would do things like the wild hunt. The wild hunt takes place on the day of Samhain, or should I say the night of Samhain. So what happens on Samhain, which is basically Halloween, October 31st, that's the day when the veil is the thinnest, according to the Druids. That's the day, it's similar to Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. In Mexico, they have a celebration to celebrate the dead and honor the dead. The Druids, they would connect with the fallen, but another thing that they would do is, like I mentioned, the wild hunt. The wild hunt was where they truly were tested against the forces of nature, where their life was literally on the line. And what they would win in return is dominion over that land. They would win the ability to have basically command over the spirits of this realm that they were competing against. What they had to do, they had to begin their ceremony at night. I believe it was midnight. They had to go out, and upon that time, they had a set time frame for which they had decreed beforehand. You're also supposed to show up each day beforehand, 3 days prior, all 3 days, to give an offering to the spirits within that realm, to be able to, and to make your declaration of what it is that you want and the challenge that you wish to embark upon. Once you do that and you light the fire, you basically have to throw in a mandrake root in order to begin the ceremony. Once you do that, that's when the hunt begins. And what happens within that, you may come up against physical, mental, or emotional blocks and obstacles along the way. Maybe you get disoriented, or they use different various forces of nature: fog, rain, lightning, thunder, maybe even fire. They could use whatever elements, whatever animals possibly are in that realm to stop you. The reward may not just be for the ability to have dominion over that area of the land, but also maybe even to get supplies, things like a certain type of herb or something that you need. However, if you lose and you survive, then you have to give back to the land something in return. Another aspect I wanted to touch on was the ranking system that they had. The Druids, they had 3 rankings among them, were the Ovates, the Bards, and of course the Druids. The Ovates were the initial rank. They wore green robes to symbolize growth and rebirth and newness. These people study law, astronomy, medicine, and music. It's in a similar way to how our liberal arts curriculum is. Second is the Bards. The Bards, you might be familiar with people like Dandelion on The Witcher. He's a bard. He goes across the land singing of the history and all of these glorious things that have happened, and to continue to deepen and explore the arts and the knowledge of the world itself.
Guys, your harmonies were a little pitchy. Gordon, you're amazing. Talent recognizes talent. Let's go again. 3, 4, and lock me
That's
up
it.
and stop
I'm
me
taking
up
shit.
and throw.
The Bards, they wore robes of blue, the color of the sky, truth, and harmony. They were especially trained in the musical fine arts, as well as instruments, poetry, history, and song spell. Their function was to travel throughout the land, exchanging news, preaching diplomacy, and gathering information for the administrative branches of Druidism. Most importantly, preserving the best of culture through art and music. And lastly, the Druids. The Druids were robed in white, which is the color of purity, knowledge, and spiritual unity. They were the prophets, the ministers, the judges, and the priests. They often addressed people once a week, which was on the day of the sun, which is where we get Sunday. The Druids were originally under strict vows not to marry, and this was to keep them pure, to keep them focused, to truly embody that sympathetic resonance that we spoke of, the like attracts like, so as to not dilute their energy and to distract themselves from focusing solely on their mission and their purpose, to delve into that druidic way and to deepen with their connection to the land and with themselves. There's so much that I could talk about with the Druids, and honestly it's been tough for me to really niche it down and narrow it down into what specifically I wanted to touch on, because there's so much. And I've been studying the Druids for several years now. I met somebody at a Renaissance festival a few years back who, to me, embodied what I felt like was the energy of the Druid. And without even thinking about it, I walked up and asked him if he was a Druid, because I had this, almost like this vision of meeting him beforehand. I kept seeing like what he looked like. I just kept feeling like I was going to meet this person, and I didn't know it was going to be at that specific event, but on the way there, I kept seeing it. And in my mind, I was thinking it was going to be like later in the future, I'm going to meet this person. But no, it happened there, and he was the one that introduced me to this book, The 21 Lessons of Merlin. He was the one to lead me down that path. And I've been in a little bit of contact with him since, but I haven't been able to see and like actually physically connect with him. But ever since I've met him and he's introduced me to this book, it's really opened me up to a vast array of possibilities that I didn't even know was possible. And to a world that I had been drawn to for so long, I just didn't know what it was exactly. What we go through is a result of these repeating patterns coming into fruition into multiple lifetimes, because we tap into these archetypes, these archetypal energies that imprint onto our consciousness, onto our DNA. We take this with us everywhere that we go. This imprinting jumps from various different timelines, and we pick up so many different aspects, and it's our job to be able to bring that back within us, to be able to integrate that. I believe the Druids were aware of this. They were aware of the fact that we are energy. We are more than what we are led on to be. More than just this physical flesh. And they understood that life itself, nature, has the answers that we seek. They understood that things come in cycles and patterns, and to understand those cycles and patterns is to better understand ourselves, because we can deepen ourselves with that, with those patterns. We can understand what patterns we are already in and break them if necessary, and jump into new ones, and create a new world for which we perceive from the collective pieces of the puzzle that we have gathered, we have brought here in this time, in this present moment. We are here, my friends, to do this work, to create from our heart, to give that back to the world. And we can't do that if we don't truly understand ourselves and understand the world around us. That is why the Druids carried with them so much wisdom, because they understood that simple truth, that we are simply a reflection of the world around us. We are simply an embodiment of these energies, for which encompasses the entire reality for which we exist. Much could be learned from the Druids to be able to take within our own lives. And a lot of what people follow as paganism now was derived from the Druids. Even a lot of Christian beliefs are derived from the beliefs and practices that the Druids had. It is important for us to understand the different cultures that came before us, to understand what worked and what they did and why. It'll help us to see the different perspectives of life and to see the different perspectives of ourselves, to work within that framework so that we can shift out of the old and into the new. So that's all I have for you today, my friends. I'll be touching more on the Druids later. I have so much more here that I wanted to talk about that I don't want to talk too much about it and make it confusing or just start rambling. I also want to keep it a little more short and concise. So that's all I got for you today, my friends. I just want to say that I am very grateful to be on this journey, this pilgrimage with you, as we walk each other back home. It's been an incredible experience, full of lots of hardship, but also lots of beauty. And I appreciate you for being along the ride with me. Thank you. Peace, love, namaste.